Story 1. Giuseppe Setola was born on November 5, 1970, in the region of Campania in southern Italy. This area is known for its crowded cities, rural farmland, and a long history of organized crime groups. He grew up in a part of Campania where the Camorra, a network of criminal families, held power over local businesses and daily life. From a young age, Setola was surrounded by people who made money through illegal activities. He did not come from a wealthy family. Like many boys in that area, he saw that joining a clan could bring money and respect. Setola had at least one older brother named Pasquale. The family lived in or near the town of Caserta, which sits inland from the coast. During his childhood and teenage years, he attended school only for a basic education. He did not pursue higher studies. Instead, he began spending time with older men who were connected to the Camorra. By his late teens, he was known in the neighborhood as someone who was willing to do small jobs for the local clan. He learned how to handle himself in disputes, how to keep secrets, and how to follow orders without asking questions. As a young man, Setola held no regular legal job that was publicly recorded. His income came from activities tied to the Casalisi clan, which was the dominant Camorra group in the Caserta area. He became known among clan members as a reliable person who stayed calm under pressure. He developed a habit of watching people carefully before making a move. He also learned to use disguises and to move through the back streets and countryside without being noticed. These habits came from watching older criminals and practicing what they taught him. In his social life, Setola kept a small circle. He trusted few people outside the clan. He married a woman named Stefania Martinelli. Their marriage was private, and they did not draw attention to themselves. Setola preferred to stay out of sight. He did not flash money in public or talk openly about his connections. To outsiders, he appeared as a quiet man who kept to himself. But within the clan, his reputation grew. He was seen as someone who could be given important tasks without fear that he would make mistakes or talk to the police. By the early 2000s, Setola had moved up in the Casalisi organization. He had learned how to handle weapons, how to plan movements, and how to make sure orders were carried out. He had also learned that the clan's power depended on fear and secrecy. Any person who broke the rules or cooperated with authorities was treated as an enemy. Setola understood this rule completely. He built his life around it. He did not keep written records. He did not speak about clan business on phones if he could avoid it. He relied on face-to-face meetings in places where outsiders could not see or hear. In the spring of 2008, Setola was given a court order to stay under house arrest. He had been convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, but a doctor provided a certificate saying Setola had an eye infection. Based on that medical note, the court allowed him to serve the sentence at home. He was placed under house arrest in his residence. Almost immediately after the house arrest began, he escaped. He left his home and went into hiding. From that moment, he was a fugitive, but the people who had helped him before continued to help him. They gave him places to stay, food, and information. He was now living completely outside the law, and he was ready to carry out orders for the clan without any supervision from the police. After Setola escaped from house arrest in the spring of 2008, he did not simply hide. He went back to work for the Casalisi clan. The clan was going through a period of conflict. There were power struggles between different groups. The leaders wanted to send a clear message to anyone who challenged them. Setola was chosen to lead a squad of killers. His job was to carry out violent acts that would remove enemies and scare others into obeying. The squad was made up of men who were loyal to Setola. They were given weapons and instructions. Setola planned each action carefully. He studied the movements of the people they targeted. He chose times when the targets were alone or vulnerable. He also used disguises. In May 2008, Setola and another clan member named Gianluca Baidognetti put on clothes that made them look like anti-mafia police officers. Their target was a woman who had started cooperating with the police. She was an informant. Setola and his men wanted to punish her family to send a warning. They went to the area where the informant's sister and niece lived. They tricked the two women into coming out onto the street. Then they opened fire. The attack did not kill either woman, but one of them was wounded. The message was clear: families of informants would not be safe. Setola continued to lead his squad through the summer of 2008. They carried out murders against rival clan members. They also went after business owners who refused to pay protection money. The squad would often use a motorcycle. Setola sometimes drove the motorcycle himself during the attacks. He would approach a target, and a second man on the back of the bike would shoot. Then they would speed away through narrow streets where police cars could not follow. Between May and December 2008, authorities later counted that Setola either ordered or personally carried out 18 murders. One of the murders was of a man who owned a gambling arcade. The arcade was in a coastal town near Caserta. The owner had not paid the required money to the clan. Setola made sure the man was killed as an example to other business owners. The killing was done in a way that showed the clan's power. There was no attempt to hide that it was a punishment. The most violent event came in September 2008. Setola set his sights on a group of West African immigrants in the town of Castel Volturno. The immigrants were selling drugs in an area that the Casalisi clan considered its territory. The clan did not want competition. Setola decided to punish them in a way that would terrify anyone else who might try to take business from the clan. On September 18, 2008, Setola and members of his squad drove to Castel Volturno. They used cars and motorcycles. They found a group of 6 African immigrants. The squad opened fire with multiple weapons. More than 100 shots were fired. All 6 immigrants were killed. The attack was sudden and extremely violent. It happened in a public area, so many people saw it or heard the gunfire. After the massacre, Setola did not stop. He continued to lead the squad through the end of 2008. The killings and violent acts were meant to eliminate rivals, punish those who did not pay, and make sure that no one would dare cooperate with the police. Setola stayed in hiding, but remained in control. He moved between safe houses provided by clan members. His wife, Stefania Martinelli, stayed with him in some of these locations. The police were searching for him, but he had people who warned him when officers were near. In October 2008, a member of Setola's own killing squad named Oris Spagnolo decided to break away and began giving information to the police. That was a serious problem for Setola because Spagnolo knew the squad's methods, the hiding places, and the other members. Still, Setola continued his work. In November 2008, Gianluca Baidognetti, the same man who had helped with the May attack on the informant's family, was arrested for attempted murder. Setola remained free. Even as the police got closer, Setola did not slow down. He kept giving orders. He kept using disguises and moving through the countryside and small towns. He stayed in touch with other clan members through messengers and brief, carefully timed meetings. By the end of 2008, Setola had become one of the most wanted fugitives in Italy. But he was still out in the open, living in safe houses, planning the next moves for his squad. The police investigation into the killings grew more intense after the September 2008 massacre in Castel Volturno. That attack drew national attention. The Italian government sent 500 soldiers to the area to help keep order. The interior minister stated that the Casalisi clan had declared war on the state. Prosecutors and anti-mafia officers made Setola their primary target. They knew he was the leader of the killing squad. In October 2008, a key development occurred. Oris Spagnolo, a member of Setola's own squad, decided to cooperate with the police. He began giving them detailed information about how the squad operated, where they hid, and who else was involved. With Spagnolo's help, police started arresting other members of the squad. They also learned more about Setola's movements and the people who protected him. In November 2008, police made another discovery. A Carabinieri paramilitary police officer had been passing information to Setola about police operations. The officer was arrested. This showed that Setola had people inside the law enforcement system who warned him when raids were coming. Despite that, the circle around Setola was closing. Franco Roberti, a Naples anti-mafia prosecutor, said publicly that they were working to flush Setola out. By January 2009, Setola was hiding in a house in a town called Trentola di Senta. He was living there with his wife, Stefania Martinelli, and another suspected mobster. The police had been watching the area. On January 12, 2009, about 50 Carabinieri officers surrounded the house. They moved in to arrest him. When the officers entered, Setola and his bodyguard escaped through a trap door in the floor. The trap door was secured with a sophisticated locking system. They crawled through a sewer system that stretched for about a mile. The layout of the sewers had been studied carefully beforehand, so they knew exactly which way to go. Police searched the sewers, but did not find them. Setola emerged from a manhole outside a dairy. He found a woman with a car, robbed her of the vehicle, and drove away. Inside the house, police found weapons. They arrested Setola's wife and questioned her. Later that same night, the prosecutors who were leading the hunt for Setola received a threatening letter. Inside the envelope were 5 rounds of live ammunition. The message was meant to intimidate them, but the investigation did not stop. 2 days later, on January 14, 2009, police received a tip about Setola's location. He was in the town of Mignano Monte Lungo. He had injured his wrist during his escape through the sewers and was seeking treatment. Officers moved in. When they arrived, Setola ran. He led them on a chase across rooftops. The officers pursued him and eventually caught him. He was placed under arrest. After his arrest, Setola was sent to a maximum security prison under the 41 bis regime. This was the strictest form of imprisonment in Italy. He was kept in solitary confinement in a cell that contained only a bed, a table, and a stool. He had no television, no radio, and no newspapers. Guards watched him at all times. The trial for the Castel Volturno massacre took place in the court of Santa Maria Capua Vetere in the province of Caserta. In April 2011, the court delivered its verdict. Setola was convicted along with 4 other men, Davide Granato, Alessandro Cirillo, Giovanni Letizia, and Antonio Alus. The court recognized aggravating circumstances that included racial hatred and terrorist purposes. Setola and 3 of the others were sentenced to life in prison. Antonio Alus received a sentence of 23 years. Following Setola's arrest, the leadership of the Casalisi clan passed to another boss, Michele Bidognetti. That man was arrested in April 2009. Setola's older brother, Pasquale, was already in prison at that time. The killing squad that Setola had led was dismantled. The 6 West African immigrants who died in September 2008 were remembered as victims of a brutal act meant to enforce the clan's control over territory and drug sales. Giuseppe Setola remains in prison serving his life sentence, and the case against him stands as one of the most significant prosecutions of the Camorra in the Caserta region. Story 2. Eduardo Ravello was born on October 13, 1968, in Mexico. His family lived in a poor area, and from a young age he saw the struggles that came with having little money. He grew up speaking Spanish, and as a child he moved between Mexico and the United States because his family looked for work. When he was still young, he obtained permanent resident status in the United States. That status allowed him to live and cross the border legally, which later became a tool he used to move back and forth without raising suspicion. As a teenager, Ravello did not finish much school. He left his studies early and began spending time with older boys in his neighborhood who were part of street groups. He learned that in these groups, respect was earned by being tough and by showing loyalty to those in charge. He started to build a reputation for being quiet but ruthless. People who knew him said he did not talk a lot, but when he acted without hesitation. In his late teens and early 20s, Ravello became connected to the Barrio Azteca gang. The gang started in the Texas prison system, but grew into an organization that operated on both sides of the border. Ravello was not in prison when he joined. Instead, he worked on the streets, running small jobs for gang members who were older. He showed that he could follow orders and that he was willing to do things others would not do. Because of this, he slowly moved up inside the gang structure. By 1994, when he was 26 years old, Ravello had already started to build relationships with people who were not just gang members, but also members of the Juarez cartel. The Juarez cartel was a powerful drug trafficking organization based in Ciudad Juarez, just across the border from El Paso, Texas. Ravello understood that the Barrio Azteca gang could gain power if it worked directly for the cartel. He made himself useful to cartel leaders by delivering messages, arranging meetings, and proving that he could be trusted with secrets. During these years, Ravello held no regular job. His income came from the gang's activities, though he tried to appear like an ordinary man. He married and had children, and he kept his family in neighborhoods controlled by the Barrio Azteca. He did not drink heavily or use drugs in public. People who saw him in his neighborhood described him as a man who dressed plainly and kept his eyes moving, always watching his surroundings. His habits were careful. He did not trust many people. He changed where he slept from one night to the next, and he used different cars so that no one could easily track him. Even before he became the top leader of the gang, he acted like a man who expected to be hunted. He told those close to him that the only way to stay alive was to never let anyone know your next move. By the early 2000s, Ravello had become one of the most respected and feared figures inside the Barrio Azteca. His power did not come from being the loudest. It came from his connection to the Juarez cartel and his willingness to handle problems in ways that left no witnesses. But he had not yet taken the top position. That moment would come later, and it would change everything. By 2005, Ravello had already spent more than a decade building his reputation inside the Barrio Azteca. His main value to the Juarez cartel was simple. He could make problems disappear. That year, a problem came up. Some members of the Barrio Azteca had stolen drugs or money from the cartel. The cartel did not tolerate theft. Ravello was told to find those members and deal with them. Ravello called on a man who was a lower-ranking gang member and also an informant. He gave this man an order: help locate the gang members who had stolen from the cartel. The informant agreed because he was afraid to say no. Once the targets were found, Ravello arranged for them to be brought to a house in El Paso, Texas. At that house, one gang member was bound. His mouth was wrapped with duct tape, so he could not scream. His wrists were wrapped the same way, and his ankles were tied. He could not move, and he could not call for help. After the man was bound, Ravello and others handed him over to members of the Juarez cartel. The cartel took him away. That man was never seen or heard from again. What happened to him after he was delivered was never confirmed, but the method showed how Ravello operated. He used his position to identify targets, he used other gang members to do the physical work, and he made sure the final act was done by the cartel, so that no single person held all the responsibility. For the next 3 years, Ravello continued working under the then leader of the Barrio Azteca. The gang's business grew. They served as hitmen for the cartel, which meant they carried out murders on command. They also ran their own criminal activities to make money. These activities included arson, where they set fire to buildings belonging to rivals. They committed assault against people who owed money or who disrespected the gang. They stole cars, often crossing them over the border to sell. They kidnapped people for ransom, holding them in safe houses in Ciudad Juarez or El Paso. They smuggled both drugs and people across the border, using the fact that many members had legal status or knew the crossing points. They also ran prostitution rings and collected extortion payments from small businesses in neighborhoods they controlled. Money from all these crimes was gathered and then cleaned through money laundering. Some of the money was put into prison commissary accounts for gang members who were locked up. This kept those inmates loyal and made sure the gang had influence even inside the walls. In March 2008, Revello decided to take the top position. The leader at the time was a man who had held power for years. Revello did not challenge him openly. Instead, he planned a betrayal. He got close to the leader, then attacked him without warning. Revello stabbed the man several times. After the stabbing, he shot him in the neck to make sure he was dead. The killing was quick and done in a private place where no witnesses who would talk could see. With the previous leader dead, Revello took control of the Barrio Azteca. He became the head of an organization with approximately 600 active members. His connection to the Juarez cartel became even stronger. The cartel now used him and his gang as their primary enforcement group in the border region. Under his command, the gang carried out multiple homicides. Each killing followed a pattern. A target was identified by the cartel or by gang leadership. A team of 3 or 4 members was sent, and the murder was done with guns or knives in locations that were chosen to minimize witnesses. Revello himself did not commit most of these killings with his own hands after he became leader. Instead, he gave orders. He used his permanent resident status to move between Mexico and the United States freely, and he used that freedom to supervise operations from both sides. He established a base in Ciudad Juarez, in a neighborhood that was fully controlled by the Barrio Azteca. In that neighborhood, he had bodyguards who stayed with him at all times. He used armored vehicles to travel, because he knew rival gangs and rival cartels wanted him dead. He also took steps to protect his identity. He understood that law enforcement was looking for him. He changed his appearance. He considered plastic surgery to alter his face so that he would not be recognized. He also thought about altering his fingertips so that his fingerprints would not match any records. These were not rumors. Federal authorities later confirmed that he had made these plans. As leader, Revello ran the gang like a business. He held meetings in safe houses. He gave orders through messengers so that he did not have to be seen. When a rival gang member needed to be eliminated, he assigned the task to a crew and gave them the weapons. When the cartel demanded that someone be kidnapped or killed, Revello made sure his men did it on time. Each crime fed the next. Drug money paid for weapons. Weapons made the gang more violent. Violence brought more attention from the cartel, and the cartel gave them more work. Between 2008 and the years that followed, the Barrio Azteca under Revello's leadership became one of the most violent gangs on the border. The homicides they committed were not random. Each one had a reason, a debt, a betrayal, a territory dispute, or an order from the cartel. The victims were often rival gang members, but they also included people who owed money, people who talked to police, and sometimes innocent people who were in the wrong place when an attack happened. Revello never stopped moving. He changed houses regularly. He kept a small circle of trusted men around him. He used his wife and children as cover, keeping them in the same Barrio Azteca-controlled neighborhood so that he could be near them while still hiding. The crimes continued month after month, and because he was careful, no one had yet been able to reach him. For years, law enforcement on both sides of the border knew that Eduardo Revello was the leader of the Barrio Azteca and that he was directing murders, drug trafficking, and other crimes. The FBI opened a formal investigation into his activities. Agents gathered evidence from informants, from wiretaps, and from gang members who were arrested on other charges and later agreed to talk. Each piece of information pointed to Ravello as the man giving the orders. By 2009, the FBI had built enough evidence to charge Ravello with federal crimes related to drug trafficking and organized crime. But they could not find him. He had gone deep into hiding in Ciudad Juarez, moving between safe houses and using bodyguards and armored vehicles. On October 20th, 2009, the FBI added him to its 10 most wanted fugitives list. He was the 493rd person to receive that status. The listing meant that his picture was distributed across the country and internationally, and a reward was offered for information leading to his capture. Even with his face known, Ravello remained hard to catch. He controlled the neighborhood where he stayed, and residents who were not gang members knew not to talk to outsiders. Federal authorities learned that Ravello was considering plastic surgery to change his appearance, and that he thought about altering his fingerprints to avoid identification. This made the search more difficult. Investigators had to rely on intelligence from multiple sources, including Mexican military and police units that worked alongside the FBI. The investigation did not focus only on Ravello. Agents also built cases against other Barrio Azteca leaders and members. Through arrests of lower-level gang members, the FBI gathered more details about Ravello's movements, his communication methods, and the people who protected him. By 2018, a clearer picture emerged. Mexican authorities, working with the FBI, identified a location in Ciudad Juarez where Ravello and several of his top associates were staying. On June 26, 2018, Mexican police and military units carried out a coordinated raid. They surrounded the location in the early morning hours. Ravello was inside along with other Barrio Azteca members. The raid was swift. Ravello was taken into custody without a fight. Several other gang members were also arrested at the same time. The FBI announced the capture later that day. After more than 9 years as a fugitive, Ravello was in custody. Following his arrest in Mexico, the United States government began the process to bring him to the United States to face federal charges. He was extradited across the border. Once in U.S. federal court, he was formally charged with racketeering, drug trafficking, and other crimes connected to his leadership of the Barrio Azteca. The case against him included testimony from former gang members, documents, and evidence gathered over more than a decade. Ravello did not go to trial. Instead, he entered into a plea agreement with federal prosecutors. He agreed to plead guilty to certain charges in exchange for a negotiated sentence. The court accepted the agreement. At his sentencing hearing, the judge considered the evidence of his role in ordering murders and running a criminal organization. Ravello was sentenced to life in prison. After his sentence, Ravello was placed in a federal maximum security prison. He will remain there for the rest of his life. The Barrio Azteca gang continued to exist, but without him as a leader, the organization lost a significant part of its connection to the Juarez cartel. Many of the victims' families never received full answers about what had happened to their loved ones, but the conclusion of the case meant that the man who had ordered so much violence was permanently removed from the streets. For the victims who had been killed, kidnapped, or harmed under Ravello's command, justice came in the form of his capture and his life sentence. The informant who had testified in 2005 about the duct-taped victims saw, years later, that the man who had given those orders was finally held accountable. Eduardo Ravello's long escape from justice ended on the day Mexican forces entered his hiding place, and the law closed its case on him for good. Story 3. Jose Luis Saenz was born in Los Angeles, California. His father was a Mexican man who belonged to a gang called Maravilla. His mother was also Mexican. She had problems with drugs and alcohol. Because of these problems, she could not take care of Jose properly. Since his parents were not able to raise him, Jose spent most of his childhood living with his grandmother. She lived in a small backyard bungalow on Ferris Avenue. The house was small and sat behind another house. Jose was an only child, so he had no brothers or sisters. To have company, he spent much of his time with his cousins. They often went together to the Pico Aliso housing projects. These were large apartment buildings in East Los Angeles where many families lived. It was an area where gangs were active, and Jose grew up seeing gang members around him from a young age. Jose attended high school in the Los Angeles Unified School District. He went to classes like other students, but he did not finish. He dropped out before earning his diploma. He did not return to complete his education. In 1998, before any of the later events took place, the Saenz family was evicted from their home. They had to leave their residence because of an unspecified violation. No details were given about what caused the eviction, but the family had to move out. Jose continued to live in the East Los Angeles area. He kept close ties with his grandmother and with cousins in the neighborhood. He had a former girlfriend named Sagrita Hernandez, and they had a young daughter together. His daily life revolved around the same streets and the same people he had known since childhood. After the eviction in 1998, Jose Saenz remained in East Los Angeles. He was on parole at that time, meaning he had been released from custody, but was still under supervision. He continued to associate with members of his gang, including a young man named Juan Pena, who was only 14 years old. On July 25, 1998, Saenz and Pena set a plan in motion. They wanted to attack members of a rival gang called East Los Angeles Tracy. A week earlier, someone from that gang had assaulted Pena. Saenz decided to get revenge. He and Pena arranged a fake drug deal. They told two rival gang members, Josue Hernandez and Leonardo Ponce, that they could buy drugs from them. The two men agreed and came to meet Saenz and Pena in the Aliso Village area of Boyle Heights, near 210 North Clarence Street. When Josue Hernandez and Leonardo Ponce arrived, they were unarmed. They did not expect violence. Saenz pulled out a gun and shot them. He shot Ponce in the chest, thigh, and back. He shot Hernandez 3 times in the head. Both men died at the scene. The way Saenz killed them, close range, without warning, was later described as execution style. After the shooting, Saenz fled. He knew the police would look for him. He went to the apartment of his former girlfriend, Sagrita Hernandez. She was the mother of his 2-year-old daughter. He hid there, believing he would be safe for a while. On August 5, 1998, about 11 days after the double murder, Sagrita Hernandez was taken against her will. Saenz, along with other people who helped him, kidnapped her. They brought her to his grandmother's bungalow on Ferris Avenue, the same small house where Saenz had grown up. When Saenz arrived at the bungalow with Sagrita, his grandmother was inside. He told her to leave her own home. He said that he and Sagrita were trying to fix their relationship. His grandmother believed him and left the house. 3 hours later, at 11 o'clock in the morning, Saenz called his grandmother on the phone. He told her not to come home yet. He said he had just made a big mistake. His grandmother did not listen. She returned to the bungalow. When she went inside, she found Sagrita Hernandez in the back bedroom. Sagrita was lying half-dressed on the floor. She had been shot once in the temple. She was dead. Inside the house, detectives would later find a pile of spent bullet shells from a .357 Magnum gun sitting on a dresser. Saenz had left a note. The note said that the people who drove him there had nothing to do with what happened. He had also written a message on the living room wall with a pencil. In that message, he asked his grandmother to take care of his daughter and said he loved her. The reason Saenz killed Sagrita was that she knew about the murders he had committed on July 25th. She could tell the police what she knew. By killing her, Signs tried to protect himself from being caught for the double murder. Shortly after Sagrita's body was found, Juan Pena, the 14-year-old who had helped with the drug deal ruse, was arrested. Someone had told the police that Pena was with Signs at the scene of the double murder. Even though Pena was not the shooter, he was charged with the two murders. Signs was now wanted for 3 murders: Josue Hernandez, Leonardo Ponce, and Sagrita Hernandez, plus kidnapping and rape. A warrant was issued for his arrest. The Los Angeles City Council put up a reward of $75,000 for information leading to the capture of the person responsible for these crimes. But Signs had already disappeared. There were no leads on where he had gone. For the next 10 years, Signs remained hidden. He did not resurface in any way that the police could track. Then in 2008, new events began to unfold. In August 2008, 2 members of a gang called Lot Stoner were driving a rental car in Missouri. A state trooper stopped them for a routine traffic check. During a search of the vehicle, the trooper found $610,000 in cash hidden inside a secret compartment. The money was wrapped in packages and marked with the name Toro. That name was later discovered to be one of Signs' aliases. The police confiscated the money. One of the men in the car was a drug trafficker named Oscar Torres, who was 38 years old and a friend of Signs. On October 5, 2008, a man named Anthony Limon agreed to do a favor for Torres. Limon drove a Hummer limousine that he did not own. It belonged to someone else. Torres asked Limon to pick up 4 men that night. Limon picked up the first 3 men. Then he drove to a restaurant called Elephant Bar in the city of Lakewood. There, he picked up Signs. After that, Signs told Limon where to drive. First they went to Montebello. Then, around 5 in the morning, Signs ordered Limon to drive to the home of the limousine owner in Whittier. When they arrived at the house, Signs got out. There was a home surveillance system that recorded video. The cameras captured Signs arriving at the house of Oscar Torres. The video showed Signs chasing Torres out of his own front door. Then Signs shot Torres 4 times in the head. Torres died at the scene. After the shooting, someone removed the DVD disc that held the surveillance footage. But the video was still stored on the hard drive of the security system. When investigators later examined the equipment, they found the video. The footage clearly showed Signs as the shooter. Inside the house, detectives found Anthony Limon. He had been shot in the back, but he survived. The police also found 40 handguns, assault rifles, and a short rifle inside Torres's home. About a month after Torres was killed, Signs' cousin Johnny Prado was arrested for the murder and for the attempted murder of Limon. Prado was charged and later sentenced to prison. Signs was now wanted for a 4th murder. He had killed Josue Hernandez, Leonardo Ponce, Sagrita Hernandez, and Oscar Torres. He was also wanted for kidnapping and rape from the 1998 case. Despite the arrest of his cousin, Signs himself remained free. The video evidence from the Torres murder gave investigators a clear picture of his face and his actions, but he was not yet caught. After the murder of Oscar Torres in October 2008, investigators had clear evidence. The video from the home surveillance system showed Jose Signs chasing Torres out of his front door and shooting him 4 times in the head. Detectives also found Anthony Limon wounded inside the house, and he later gave statements about what happened that night. With this information, law enforcement now had a solid case linking Signs to a 4th murder. Signs had already been wanted for the 3 murders in 1998, but for 10 years there had been no reliable information about where he was. The new case changed that. Investigators began working with federal agencies to track him down. They learned that Signs had fled to Mexico after the 1998 crimes and had been moving between Mexico, Central America, the United States, and Canada for years. He used many false names, as many as 20 different aliases, and sometimes obtained legitimate identity documents through fraud. He was also believed to be working as an enforcer for a drug cartel in Mexico. On October 19, 2009, the Federal Bureau of Investigation added Jose Luis Saenz to its list of 10 most wanted fugitives. He was the 492nd person to be placed on that list. The FBI offered a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to his capture. The Los Angeles City Council had already offered a $75,000 reward for the earlier crimes. Saenz was considered armed and extremely dangerous. Authorities stated that in 1998 he had vowed to kill police officers if they tried to arrest him. For 3 more years after being placed on the list, Saenz remained free. He continued to move around and avoid capture. Investigators later learned that during this time, he even attended Los Angeles Lakers basketball games while supposedly hiding from the police. He bragged about this after he was finally caught. On November 22, 2012, Saenz's time as a fugitive ended. He was located in Guadalajara, Mexico. Mexican federal police officers found him and arrested him. He was working for a Mexican drug cartel at the time. After the arrest, Mexico extradited him to the United States so he could face the charges against him. Once back in American custody, Saenz was brought to trial for the murders, kidnapping, and rape. The evidence against him was strong. In the 1998 double murder, there was testimony from Juan Pena, who had been a 14-year-old accomplice. Pena had given a detailed confession before he died of leukemia in 2001. For the murder of Sagrita Hernandez, there was the physical evidence from the bungalow, the bullet shells, the note, and the message on the wall, along with the testimony of Saenz's grandmother, who had been forced to leave her own home. For the murder of Oscar Torres, the surveillance video clearly showed Saenz committing the crime, and Anthony Limon survived to testify about the events of that night. The court found Jose Luis Saenz guilty. He was sentenced to prison for the 4 murders, the kidnapping, and the rape. He received a lengthy sentence that reflected the severity of his crimes. After the case ended, the victims' families were left with the knowledge that the man who had killed their loved ones was finally behind bars. Josue Hernandez, Leonardo Ponce, Sagrita Hernandez, and Oscar Torres had each lost their lives to Saenz's violence. Juan Pena, the young accomplice, had died in custody years before. Saenz's cousin Johnny Prado remained in prison for his role in the Torres murder and the shooting of Anthony Limon. Jose Luis Saenz, who had eluded authorities for more than 14 years, would now spend the rest of his life locked away, with no chance to harm anyone else. Story 4. Robert William Fisher was born on April 13, 1961, in Brooklyn, New York. His father, William Fisher, worked as a banker. His mother was Jan Howell. Robert had 2 sisters, making him the middle child. The family lived in New York during his early years. When Robert was 15 years old, his parents divorced. The divorce was difficult and upsetting for him. Friends and relatives later said that the split affected Robert deeply. A friend from high school said Robert felt very bitter about what happened. After the divorce, Robert and his 2 sisters went to live with their father in Arizona. All 3 children attended Saguaro High School in Tucson. Years later, when Robert was an adult, he would still talk about his parents' separation. He told co-workers that his life would have been different if his mother had not left the family. After high school, Robert joined the United States Navy. He tried to become a Navy SEAL, but he did not succeed. Later, he worked as a firefighter in California. That job ended because he hurt his back. The injury was serious enough that he had to retire from firefighting. He then moved his family to Arizona and started working in the medical field. Over the years, he held several jobs. He worked as a weed sprayer in the late 1980s. The man who hired him said Robert was quiet and had back pain, but he was a good worker. Later, Robert became a surgical catheter technician and then a respiratory therapist. At the time of the events that would come later, he worked as a surgical technician at a hospital in Scottsdale called the Mayo Clinic. In 1987, Robert married a woman named Mary Cooper. They had 2 children, a daughter named Brittany and a son named Bobby. By all accounts, the family life inside their home was not happy. People who knew them described Robert as a controlling man. He was cruel to his wife and children and kept a strict distance from them. He and Mary fought often about 2 things, sex and money. Mary took a job that she told friends was her security fund, meaning she wanted to have money of her own. Robert did not allow his wife to make simple choices about their home. He insisted that the walls stay white and only allowed a few pictures to be hung. Mary's mother had made special quilts for her, but Robert would not let Mary put them up. He told her to keep them in the closet and asked why she did not get rid of them. Mary's friend told police that Robert would repeatedly say, "Isn't it time you got rid of this stuff?" Robert showed the same harsh control toward his children. He was embarrassed that his son Bobby did not like to hunt or fish. On one occasion, Robert tried to teach both children how to swim by throwing them off a boat. A hunting partner who was there said the children were crying and screaming in the water. Robert pulled them back into the boat and asked, "Now there, how's that?" The hunting partner later said the children were clearly frightened. Robert was an outdoorsman and a hunter from a young age. Some of his friends noticed strange behavior during hunting trips. One time, after he killed an elk, he smeared the animal's blood on his own face. On another occasion, he snuck up behind a family that was having a picnic and fired his gun into the air. Several years before his family was killed, Robert shot a stray pit bull. He told people the dog had attacked his Labrador retriever, but police believed he had arranged the situation because he wanted to shoot the dog. Mary's mother, Ginny Cooper, later told investigators that Robert did not like to spend time with family. She said he was afraid of getting too close to people because he might lose them. Robert's own mother, Jan, noticed that Robert treated Mary in a similar way that Robert's father had treated her. Jan said she had been a "yes, sir" wife who did not stand up to her husband. She saw the same pattern early in Robert's marriage and said she had spoken to Mary about her concerns. Robert and Mary attended a Baptist church in Scottsdale. For a time, Robert took part in the church's men's ministry, but in the months before the family's life changed forever, he began to withdraw from church activities. Mary remained active in the church. Around 1998, Robert told some friends that he thought about killing himself because he was so unhappy with his marriage. He and Mary went to their senior pastor for marriage counseling. Robert also told co-workers about a one-night affair. He said he had been with a prostitute he met at a massage parlor. He worried that Mary would find out, especially because the encounter gave him a urinary tract infection that made him sick for several days in December 2000. Neighbors could hear the tension inside the Fisher home. A former neighbor said the couple screamed at each other constantly. He said you could hear it from the house next door, and what stood out was that Mary did most of the screaming. He recalled her yelling things like, "You're worthless. I could have done better than you. We should get a divorce." Robert's voice was rarely heard in these fights. In the weeks before everything changed, Mary told several friends that she was planning to divorce Robert. Robert told a hunting companion something different. He said he was renewing his commitment to his faith and to his marriage because he could not live without his family. A psychologist who later looked at the case said that an intense fear of losing one's family is common among people who were hurt by divorce when they were young. On the evening of April 9, 2001, the tension inside the Fisher home reached a point that neighbors could hear. At around 10 p.m., a neighbor reported hearing a loud argument coming from the house. That argument would be the last known time anyone heard the family alive. Police later worked to piece together a timeline of what happened inside the home. They believe the murders took place between 9:30 p.m. and 10:15 p.m. At some point during that window, Robert Fisher used a knife to cut the throats of his two children. Brittany, who was 12 years old, and Bobby, who was 10, each had their throats slashed from ear to ear. Mary Fisher was shot in the back of her head. A gun was used for her death. After the killings, Robert did not leave immediately. At 10:43 p.m., he was seen on an automatic teller machine camera. The camera recorded him withdrawing $280 in cash. In the background of that image, Mary's Toyota 4Runner was visible. Robert was already using her vehicle. It is not entirely clear whether Robert returned to the house after going to the ATM. Investigators later considered two possibilities. One was that he had already killed his family before going to get the money. The other was that he went to the ATM, then came back home. Years later, two previously uncontacted witnesses came forward. One said they saw Mary's car parked outside the Fisher house at 3:30 in the morning. Another said they saw it at 5:30 in the morning. If those witnesses were correct, Robert stayed at the house for several hours after withdrawing the money. Robert had a plan to destroy the house. He went to the back of the house and pulled the gas line from the furnace. By disconnecting the gas line, he allowed natural gas to flow into the home. The gas built up inside the house over many hours. Robert then placed a candle somewhere in the house and lit it. He left the candle burning. The gas that filled the house would take time to accumulate and sink downward. When the gas reached the flame, it would ignite. This method gave Robert a delayed explosion. By his calculation, he would have many hours to get away before the house blew up. At 8:42 a.m. on April 10th, 2001, the gas ignited. The explosion was powerful. It collapsed the front brick wall of the house. The blast rattled the frames of other houses for half a mile in every direction. Flames shot 20 feet into the air. Neighbors ran outside and saw the fire. Some used garden hoses to try to control the flames before firefighters arrived. When fire crews got there, they had to keep their distance because smaller explosions kept happening. Those secondary explosions were believed to be caused by rifle ammunition or paint cans that were inside the house catching fire. One firefighter fell and hurt his leg near the blaze, but the injury was minor. The firefighters worked to stop the fire from spreading to nearby houses. When they were able to enter the remains of the home, they found 3 bodies. A woman and 2 children were lying in bed. The fire had burned them badly. The bodies were later identified as Mary, Brittany, and Bobby. The medical examiner determined that Mary had been shot in the back of the head before the fire. The children had their throats cut before the fire. All 3 had died before the explosion. Robert Fisher was not in the house. Mary's Toyota 4Runner was also missing. The investigators who arrived at the scene began to see what had happened. The pulled gas line, the candle, the delayed explosion, all of it pointed to someone who had planned the destruction. The explosion served 2 purposes for Robert. It destroyed much of the physical evidence of the killings. It also created the possibility that people might think he had died in the fire along with his family. But his absence from the house made that unlikely. When firefighters arrived at the burning house on the morning of April 10th, 2001, they did not know yet that a crime had been committed. They focused on putting out the flames. After the fire was under control, they found 3 bodies inside. The bodies were a woman and 2 children lying in a bed. Investigators from the police and fire department began looking into the cause of the fire. They discovered the gas line had been pulled from the furnace. They also found that a candle had been placed and lit, which likely caused the explosion after gas built up. The police realized quickly that Robert Fisher was not in the house. His wife's Toyota 4Runner was also missing. On April 14th, 2001, 4 days after the fire, the Arizona Department of Public Safety sent out a statewide bulletin instructing officers to arrest Robert Fisher. He was named as the only suspect in the deaths of Mary, Brittany, and Bobby. On April 20th, 2001, the Toyota 4Runner was found in Tonto National Forest, near the towns of Young and Payson. That area was about 100 miles north of Scottsdale. The family dog, a Labrador named Blue, was underneath the car. The dog was hungry and upset but alive. Inside the car, police found an Oakland Raiders hat. It matched the hat Robert had been wearing when he was seen on the ATM camera on the night of the killings. Near the passenger door, officers found a pile of human waste. Footprints led away from the car toward the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. Police followed the prints, but did not find Robert. The reservation itself was never searched. Over the next weeks and months, investigators received many tips. Some people reported seeing a man who looked like Robert in the area where the car was found. A couple said they had seen a man resembling him walking along a road near Young a few days before the car was discovered. They did not report it right away, but after the car was found they told police. Other tips came from people who knew the family. One acquaintance said her husband had gone camping with Robert in that same area shortly before April 10th. She believed Robert had been scouting the location. On July 19, 2001, a state arrest warrant was issued in Phoenix. Robert Fisher was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. Because he had crossed state lines, a federal warrant was also issued for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. On June 29, 2002, the Federal Bureau of Investigation placed Robert Fisher on its 10 most wanted fugitives list. He was the 475th person to be added to that list. The FBI offered a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to his capture. Over the years, law enforcement followed hundreds of leads. In February 2004, a man in Vancouver, Canada, was arrested because he looked very much like Robert Fisher. The man had a missing tooth where Robert had a gold tooth, and he had a surgical scar on his back like Robert. But his fingerprints did not match, and police found no scarring that would suggest the fingerprints had been altered. The man was held for about a week until a relative identified him correctly. In October 2014, police raided a house in Commerce City, Colorado, after receiving a tip that Robert was hiding there. They arrested 2 people inside, but did not find Robert. In April 2016, on the 15th anniversary of the killings, the FBI and Scottsdale police released new age-enhanced photos showing what Robert might look like as an older man. They continued to ask the public for help. On November 3, 2021, Robert Fisher was removed from the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The FBI stated that the case had been on the list for nearly 20 years, and the extensive publicity had not resulted in his capture. However, removal from the list did not mean the case was closed. The arrest warrants remained active. Robert Fisher continued to be a wanted fugitive. Police have considered several possibilities about what happened to him. Some believe he may have died in the wilderness near where the car was found, possibly by suicide. Others think he used his outdoor skills to survive or had help from someone else. He may have crossed the border into Mexico before security was tightened after September 11, 2001. He may have started a new life under a false name. Despite the theories, no confirmed sighting has ever led to his capture. To this day, Robert William Fisher has not been arrested, and the case remains open. The story of Robert Fisher ends not with a trial or a sentence, but with the certainty that 3 people were killed in their home, and the man responsible has never been brought to justice. Story 5. Mario Roberto Flores Mejia was born on July 18, 1975, in Choloma, a city in the Cortez Department of Honduras. His family lived in a part of the country where work was often hard to find. There is little public information about his parents or whether he had siblings. As a child and young man, he He grew up like many others in his area, facing poverty and few chances for steady employment. When he was a young adult, 2 scars marked his face, one on his forehead and one on his left cheek. He also later had a large surgical scar on his neck. That scar came from an injury he suffered in 1998 during Hurricane Mitch. The hurricane was one of the deadliest storms to hit Central America, and in the chaos after the storm, he was hurt badly enough to need surgery. He kept those scars for the rest of his life. By the late 1990s, Flores decided to leave Honduras. He entered the United States as a migrant worker, looking for jobs he could do without papers. He did not settle in one place. Instead, he traveled by hopping freight trains, moving from city to city. He took work where he could find it, often staying with people who offered him a place to sleep in exchange for helping with repairs or odd jobs. His life was unsteady, and he carried few possessions with him. In 2000, he boarded a train that he believed was going to Chicago. The train did not take him there. Instead, it brought him to Philadelphia, a city he had not planned to visit. He arrived with no job and no home, carrying only what he had on his back. After arriving in Philadelphia in 2000, Flores had no place to stay. He began going by the name Carlos or Carlo and lived as a homeless drifter. In the Hunting Park neighborhood, a man named Jorge Contreras took notice of him. Contreras gave Flores shelter, clothing, and work as a handyman. As part of that work, Contreras handed Flores the keys to an abandoned apartment building. Flores was expected to do odd jobs there, but having the keys also meant he could come and go freely. On July 29, 2000, a 5-year-old girl named Iriana De Jesus was playing outside her home in the Fairhill neighborhood of Philadelphia. Her family lived nearby. At some point during the afternoon, she was seen walking from her street with a stranger. No one saw exactly what happened next, but she did not return home. Her family reported her missing that same day. For the next several days, Flores continued to use the abandoned building where he had keys. On August 3rd, 6 days after Iriana disappeared, her body was found inside that building. She was in a second-floor apartment. The building was known to be empty, but Flores had been staying there. The girl had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Her body was then wrapped inside a trash bag and left in the apartment. Near her body, investigators found a T-shirt that had a distinct political logo on it. There was blood from Iriana on the shirt. When the police questioned Jorge Contreras about the shirt, he looked at it and recognized it. He said it was one of the articles of clothing he had given to Carlos, the same man he had taken in and given work. Contreras also told the police that Carlos had not been seen in the area since the day the girl went missing. The police now knew the man they were looking for used the name Carlos. They created a sketch of his face based on descriptions from people who had seen him. The sketch showed a man with scars on his face, including one on his forehead and one on his left cheek. An arrest warrant was issued for the man they called Carlos Doe. But Flores had already left Philadelphia. He was no longer in the city, and no one knew where he had gone. After Flores left Philadelphia, the case went unsolved for years. The police had a sketch and a name, Carlos, but they did not know his real identity. No one could find him. In the meantime, Flores had moved to Arizona. In 2002, he was arrested there for shoplifting. That arrest did not connect him to the crime in Philadelphia because his fingerprints and name were not yet linked to the case. In November 2004, Flores was in Phoenix when police responded to a noise complaint at his home. During that encounter, he gave them fraudulent identification documents. He was charged with felony forgery. As part of that arrest, Arizona authorities required him to submit a DNA sample. He served time in prison, was released later in 2004, and was deported to Honduras in June 2005. He was now back in his home country, and the authorities in the United States did not yet know he was the man they wanted for the murder of Iriana De Jesus. In 2006, the DNA sample taken from Flores in Arizona was entered into the Combined DNA Index System, a national database that stores DNA profiles from criminal cases. On March 22, 2007, that sample was compared to DNA found at the crime scene in Philadelphia from 2000. The two matched. Investigators now knew that the man who had called himself Carlos was actually Mario Roberto Flores Mejia. On that same day, a local arrest warrant was issued in Pennsylvania charging him with murder and other felonies. A federal arrest warrant was also issued, charging him with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution because he had left the state and the country. The FBI placed Flores on its 10 most wanted fugitives list on June 2, 2007. A reward of up to $250,000 was offered for information leading to his capture. For years, investigators believed he was either in Honduras or had returned to the United States. He remained a fugitive for nearly 2 decades. In March 2024, the FBI released an updated image of him showing how he might look with age. On March 6, 2025, he was removed from the 10 most wanted list because he no longer met the criteria for that list, but the FBI continued to search for him. On February 11, 2026, Honduran authorities captured Flores in a remote, mountainous area of Lempira, in the Lempira department of Honduras. The arrest was carried out by the Technical Agency for Criminal Investigation of Honduras, working alongside the FBI's Transnational Anti-Gang Task Force. After his capture, a judge in Honduras ordered him held in provisional detention. He was taken to the Tamara National Penitentiary in Francisco Morazan Department to await extradition to the United States, where he would face trial for the murder of Iriana de Jesus. More than 25 years after the little girl was killed, the man who took her life was finally in custody. Story 6. Dale Cregan was born on June 6, 1983, at Tameside General Hospital in Greater Manchester, England. His mother was Anita Marie Cregan. His father was Paul Cregan, a tool setter from Manchester. Dale was one of 3 children. He had an older brother named Dean, who was born 2 years before him, and a younger sister. When Dale was still young, his father left the family. Later, Paul Cregan married a woman who worked as a police officer for Greater Manchester Police. Dale grew up in the area and went to a school called Little Moss High School in Droylsden, a town in Greater Manchester. The school no longer exists today. While he was a teenager at that school, Dale started selling cannabis. People who knew him said he also developed a strong interest in knives. It was not a normal interest. They described it as a bad fetish for knives. After finishing school, Dale went to live with his sister in Tenerife for about 18 months. When he came back to Manchester, his behavior changed. He began collecting firearms. Over time, he gathered around 10 weapons, including machine guns. By the time he was 22 years old, Dale had started dealing cocaine. He told people he was making £20,000 a week from it. But when anyone asked what he did for work, he always said he was a plasterer. Dale Cregan became known by a nickname, One Eye. He was missing his left eye. No one knows exactly how he lost it. Some people believed it was carved out with a knife. Dale told friends that it happened during a fight in Thailand. Whether that was true or not, he wore a false eye to cover the empty socket. That was the life Dale Cregan knew before any of the later events took place. He grew up in Greater Manchester, left school, dealt drugs, collected guns, and earned a reputation tied to violence and his missing eye. Dale Cregan became involved in a long feud between 2 families in Manchester. One family was the Shorts. The other was the Atkinsons. Cregan was friendly with the Atkinson family. The bad feelings between the 2 sides had been growing for years. On the night of May 25, 2012, A man named Mark Short was at a pub called the Cotton Tree in Droylsden. Mark Short was 23 years old. He was inside the pub when a gunman walked in. The gunman fired shots. Mark Short was hit and killed at the scene. The shooting was linked to the feud, and Dale Cregan was identified as a suspect. On June 4, 2012, police arrested Cregan in connection with Mark Short's murder. But they did not have enough evidence to charge him at that time. He was released on bail. That meant he was free while the investigation continued. 2 months later, on August 10, 2012, the feud took another deadly turn. Mark Short's father, David Short, was 46 years old. He was at his home on Folkestone Road East in Clayton, Manchester. That evening, someone attacked the house with a gun and a hand grenade. David Short was killed in the attack. The method was unusual because hand grenades had rarely been used in murder cases in the United Kingdom. Police later linked this attack to Cregan as well. After the death of David Short, the police continued to look for Cregan. They knew he was connected to both murders. But Cregan did not turn himself in. Instead, he planned one more act. On the morning of September 18, 2012, Cregan made a telephone call. He called the emergency number 999 and reported a burglary. He gave an address on Abbey Gardens in Hattersley, a town in Tameside, Greater Manchester. He made the call so that police officers would be sent to that address. It was a trap. 2 officers were on routine patrol that morning. Their names were Fiona Bone and Nicola Hughes. Fiona Bone was 32 years old. Nicola Hughes was 23 years old. They were both police constables with Greater Manchester Police. When the call came in about the burglary, they were sent to Abbey Gardens. They arrived at the house around 11 a.m. They did not know that Cregan was waiting for them. As they approached, Cregan attacked. He used a Glock pistol and an M75 hand grenade. He fired 32 gunshots in 31 seconds. He also set off the grenade. Fiona Bone was killed at the scene. Nicola Hughes was badly wounded. She was taken to the hospital, but later died from her injuries. Both officers were unarmed, as is standard for most police in the United Kingdom. Within an hour of the attack, Cregan walked into a police station in Hyde, a nearby town. He turned himself in. He told officers that he had done 2 coppers. He claimed he did it because police were hounding my family. He showed no regret except for saying he wished he had not killed female officers. When Cregan walked into the police station, he was already wanted for the murders of Mark Short and David Short. Now he was also in custody for the murders of the 2 police officers. After Dale Cregan walked into the police station on September 18, 2012, he was formally arrested. He was already a suspect in the murders of Mark Short and David Short. Now he was also held for the murders of police constables Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone. Over the following days, investigators gathered evidence from the 3 crime scenes. They recovered the Glock pistol and fragments of the hand grenade used in the attack on the 2 officers. They also collected ballistics evidence linking the same gun to the earlier shootings. Detectives built a clear case connecting Cregan to all 4 murders. On September 21, 2012, Cregan appeared before magistrates. He was remanded in custody, meaning he would stay in prison while waiting for trial. On September 24th, he appeared at Manchester Crown Court through a video link from Strangeways Prison. He was again remanded. The case was moved to Liverpool Crown Court for a plea hearing on November 5, 2012. At that hearing, Cregan pleaded not guilty to the murders of Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone. He also faced charges for the murders of Mark Short and David Short, along with 4 counts of attempted murder related to other people caught in the violence. The trial began on February 4, 2013, at Preston Crown Court. Cregan appeared alongside 9 other people who were charged with connected crimes such as murder and attempted murder. The court heard how the killings were part of a long feud between 2 groups. On February 12, 2013, Cregan changed his plea. He admitted in court that he had killed the two police officers. He said he had no regret except that they were women, but the court heard that he had seen them approaching the house and knew they were female officers. On May 22, 2013, Cregan also pleaded guilty to the murders of Mark Short and David Short. By doing so, he admitted to all 4 killings. The trial continued for the other defendants. On June 13, 2013, Cregan was cleared of 1 charge of attempted murder against a woman named Sharon Hark. That same day, the judge at Preston Crown Court sentenced him for the 4 murders. Because of the extreme nature of the crimes, Cregan was given a whole life order. This meant he would never be released from prison. After the trial, Cregan was sent to HM Prison Full Sutton. In August 2013, he began a hunger strike. The following month, he was moved to Ashworth Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility near Liverpool. In March 2018, he was transferred back to a prison in Manchester. While there, he was reported to have focused on his physical fitness. For the families of the victims, the aftermath brought lasting grief. The families of Mark Short and David Short saw the conclusion of the legal proceedings, but continued to live with their loss. The police force and the public remembered Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone. In December 2024, more than 12 years after their deaths, both officers were awarded the Elizabeth Emblem, a national honor given to those who died in public service. The case came to a close with Cregan serving his whole life order, and the 2 officers honored for their sacrifice. The story of Dale Cregan ended not with his arrest, but with the certainty that he would never walk free again. Story 7. David Carrick was born on January 4, 1975 in Salisbury, a town in Wiltshire, England. His father was a soldier in the Royal Artillery. His mother worked as a cleaner. At the time of David's birth, the family lived at Bulford Military Camp, which was a base for soldiers and their families. This meant that from the very beginning, David grew up around military life and discipline. When David was still young, his parents had a second child, a daughter. Soon after she was born, the family moved to a nearby town called Dington. They left the military camp and settled into a regular house in the town. David went to the local school, Dington Comprehensive School. He attended there throughout his teenage years. His education was ordinary, and there was nothing in his school years that made him stand out in a notable way. When David was a teenager, his parents divorced. The separation of his mother and father was a significant change in his home life. After the divorce, the family structure changed, but David continued living in the area. He finished his schooling and then, following in his father's footsteps, he joined the British Army. His time in the Army was short. He did not stay in the military for a long career. Instead, after a brief period as a soldier, he left the Army and looked for a different path. In 2001, David Carrick joined the Metropolitan Police, which is the police force for London. He was 26 years old at the time. He started as a response officer, which meant he was sent out to answer emergency calls and deal with incidents on the streets. His first posting was in South London. He worked there for several years, learning the job and becoming familiar with police work. In 2009, Carrick moved to a new role within the Metropolitan Police. He joined the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Branch, often shortened to PADP. This was a specialist unit. Officers in this branch were armed with guns. Their job was to protect government buildings, members of parliament, and diplomats. Carrick was trained to carry a firearm and to work in high-security environments. Within this unit, some of the colleagues he worked with gave him a nickname. They called him Bastard Dave. The name was not given because of his police work alone. It came from the way he sometimes treated people around him. Colleagues noticed that he had a tendency to be cruel. Carrick remained in this armed unit for many years. He was recertified to keep his firearm in 2017, meaning that his superiors checked him and decided he was still fit to carry a weapon on duty. By that time, he had been a police officer for 16 years. He lived in Stevenage, a town in Hertfordshire, north of London. He kept his home there while he continued working in London. After Carrick joined the Armed Protection Unit in 2009, he began using dating websites and apps. He used sites like Badoo and Tinder. His method was always the same. He would meet women online or in bars. When he met them, he told them he was a police officer. He said he worked in an armed unit. This made the women trust him. They believed he was safe because he was in law enforcement. Carrick used this trust to begin relationships with them. Once a woman became close to him, Carrick changed. He did not treat them as equals. Instead, he started to control them. He told them they belonged to him. He decided what they could wear. He decided when they could eat and what they could eat. Some victims were not allowed to eat at all for long periods. He decided where they could sleep. He told them who they could see and speak to. He would watch them through cameras he placed in his home. He spoke to them through these cameras while he was at work, accusing them if they were not doing what he wanted. One victim dropped from a size 14 to a size 6 in only a few months because Carrick controlled her food so strictly. Carrick used physical violence. He hit women with his police belt. He used handcuffs that were issued to him by the police. He put handcuffs on women while he raped them, so they could not fight back. He locked women naked in a small cupboard under the stairs. He left them there as punishment. When one woman had a panic attack inside the cupboard, Carrick stood outside and whistled. He did not let her out. He also used his police firearm to threaten. In one case, after meeting a 20-year-old woman at a bar, Carrick invited her to a housewarming party. He told her he was the safest person she could be with because he was a police officer. When she arrived, there was no party. Carrick held her in his flat for hours against her will. He raped her vaginally and anally. When she struggled, he put his handgun to her head. She believed she was going to be raped and killed. He forced his penis into her mouth so hard that he bit and bruised her. Carrick used other methods to degrade his victims. He urinated on them. He urinated into their mouths and made them swallow. He would sometimes do this during or after forcing them to perform oral sex. He also used objects. He forced a dildo into one woman's anus until she screamed. He attempted to force his fist into another woman. When she screamed, he shoved her into a shower and urinated on her. The rapes happened many times over many years. Between 2003 and 2020, Carrick abused and raped multiple women. He would often rape them anally even when they said no, begged him to stop, or cried in pain. One victim bled from her anus after he raped her. Another victim had her anus torn. Carrick ignored their pain. Sometimes he was unable to maintain an erection, and that made him angry. In one case, he attempted to rape a woman but could not, so later he humiliated her in public with comments. Carrick's job helped him hide his crimes. He told victims that he was the police and that he was the law. He said they belonged to him. One victim, who was also a police officer, did not report him because she thought other police would not believe her. Another victim was a mental health nurse. Carrick belittled her job. He also stopped her from seeing her own son for a year. He threatened her with his police baton. He sent her a photo from work of his firearm with a message that said, "Remember, I am the boss." Carrick also targeted women who were vulnerable. One woman had a mild learning disability and anxiety. Carrick could see she could not speak up for herself. He told her he was an armed police officer. She cleaned his house for him. At first he was nice, but when he drank alcohol, he became aggressive. He called her a slave. He forced her to perform oral sex until she gagged and vomited. He found this exciting. Another woman was a cleaner. Carrick told her he had done a police force check on her to gain her trust. Then he attacked her while she cleaned his shower. Some victims were in relationships with Carrick for months. One relationship lasted from March 2017 to January 2019. During that time, Carrick raped her anally and orally many times. He raped her in a tent while on holiday next to her parents' tent. He covered her mouth so she could not call for help. He gave her a sexually transmitted disease. He would shut her naked in the cupboard, even when she had panic attacks. By the time she left him, she took his whip with her to stop him from using it on other women. Carrick also committed crimes against women he met briefly. In 2009, he took a woman home from a social event. Instead of taking her to her home, he took her to his flat. He got her naked and forced his fingers inside her. Another woman reconnected with Carrick at a school reunion. She shared a room with him and another woman. When she tried to leave the bed because he was touching her, Carrick dragged her back. He held her arms behind her back and told her it would be his little secret. Then he penetrated her with his fingers and tried to rape her. Carrick sometimes offered money to control his victims. In one relationship, he offered a woman £1,000 a month to be his slut. She moved in with her 10-year-old daughter. The daughter heard the abuse and heard her mother being raped. Carrick did not want the child there, but she came anyway. He cut the woman off from her family and friends. He watched her through a camera while he worked. During the years Carrick committed these crimes, some people noticed something wrong. In 2002, there was an investigation into him for domestic abuse, but he remained in the police. In 2016, an allegation of sexual abuse was made against him. Wiltshire police looked into it, but 2 officers did not investigate properly. They later received final written warnings for how they handled it. In 2017, Carrick was recertified as an armed officer despite the complaints. His colleagues continued to call him Bastard Dave because of his cruelty, but no action was taken against him. Carrick continued his pattern. In February 2020, he met a woman through a dating site. She moved in with him in March. He quickly gained control over her. She was afraid of him because he threatened to report her to immigration authorities. He raped her anally 5 times. Each time she said no, and each time her anus bled. He told her she was making a fuss. He also forced his penis into her mouth and urinated on her face. She left him in July 2020. A year later, in July 2021, the allegations came to Hertfordshire police. Then in October 2021, another woman came forward. She said Carrick had raped her a year earlier, in August 2020. She had been afraid to report it, but one day before she came forward, a different police officer named Wayne Cousins was sentenced for the rape and murder of Sarah Everard. Cousins had served in the same armed unit as Carrick. That news made her decide to speak. She went to the police and reported that Carrick had raped her. On October 1st, 2021, a woman went to the police. She reported that David Carrick had raped her in August 2020. She had waited more than a year to come forward. The day before she reported it, the police officer Wayne Cousins had been sentenced for the rape and murder of Sarah Everard. Cousins worked in the same armed unit as Carrick. That event pushed her to finally speak. The police took her report seriously. The next day, October 2nd, 2021, officers went to Carrick's home in Stevenage, Hertfordshire. They arrested him. Body-worn video from the arrest recorded Carrick saying, "There's no necessity," when officers told him he was being arrested. He did not cooperate calmly. After the arrest, the Metropolitan Police suspended him from his job. He was no longer allowed to work as an officer. Once Carrick was arrested, more women began to come forward. They saw news reports about the case. They realized they were not alone. Over the following weeks, detectives identified 12 female victims. Each one gave an account of what Carrick had done to her. The police assigned 40 officers and staff to work on the case. Every person working on it had to give a written promise not to share information with the press. The police wanted to stop leaks before any trial. Carrick was taken to court. At first, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. In May 2022, while waiting for his trial, he was held at HM Prison Belmarsh in southeast London. He was kept on remand, meaning he stayed in prison until the court case could proceed. While there, he reportedly tried to take his own life. In December 2022, Carrick appeared at the Old Bailey Criminal Court in central London. He changed his pleas. He pleaded guilty to 49 charges. Those charges included 24 counts of rape. The charges related to 12 women. In January 2023 at Southwark Crown Court, he pleaded guilty to 4 more rape charges. In total, he admitted to 49 separate offenses. These included rape, false imprisonment, assault by penetration, sexual assault, and coercive control. The Crown Prosecution Service handled the case. The chief prosecutor, Juswant Narwal, said the scale of what Carrick had done was unlike anything she had seen in her 34 years of work. The mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, said he was sickened and appalled. The sentencing hearing began on February 6, 2023 at Southwark Crown Court. The judge was Bobby Chimagrub. Over 2 days, she heard details about each victim and each crime. On February 7th, she gave the sentence. Carrick received 36 life sentences. The judge set a minimum term of 30 years and 239 days. This meant he would not be eligible for parole until May 2nd, 2052. He would be 77 years old before he could even apply for release. After the sentence, the Attorney General's office received multiple requests to review whether the sentence was too lenient. The Solicitor General for England and Wales, Michael Tomlinson, examined the case. On March 3, 2023, he announced that the sentence would not be sent to the Court of Appeal. He said the judge had given careful and detailed consideration to every part of the case. In July 2023, 6 of Carrick's victims said they planned to sue the Metropolitan Police. They argued that the police had breached their human rights by failing to investigate properly over many years. Around the same time, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, or IOPC, began 4 separate investigations into how the Metropolitan Police had handled complaints against Carrick. The IOPC also opened a similar investigation into Wiltshire Police. In October 2023, it was reported that 12 serving and former police officers were being investigated for misconduct related to the way allegations against Carrick were handled. In June 2024, 2 officers from Wiltshire Police received final written warnings for failing to investigate an allegation of sexual abuse made against Carrick in 2016. Carrick was already in prison serving his life sentence. But in October 2024, it was announced that he had been charged with more offenses. These included 5 counts of indecent assault against a girl under the age of 14. Those offenses happened in Salisbury in 1989 and 1990, when Carrick was a teenager. He was also charged with 2 counts of rape, 1 count of sexual assault, and 1 count of coercive and controlling behavior against another woman between 2014 and 2019 in Stevenage. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court on October 17, 2024. On November 14, 2024, he appeared at the Old Bailey by video link from HMP Full Sutton. He pleaded not guilty to all the new charges. A trial date was set for November 3, 2025. On March 14, 2025, the court confirmed that date. The trial began on November 4, 2025 at the Old Bailey. The court heard the evidence for the new charges. On November 19, 2025, Carrick was found guilty on all counts. The next day, November 20, 2025, the judge gave him an additional life sentence with a minimum term of 30 years. That sentence ran alongside the one he was already serving. The story of David Carrick ends with him in prison, where he will remain for decades, while the police forces that failed to stop him faced public scrutiny, and the victims finally saw justice done. Story 8. Malik Faisal Akram was born on March 3, 1977, in Blackburn, a town in the north of England. His parents were originally from Jhelum, a city in Pakistan. They had moved to Britain before he was born. Malik was the oldest of several children in the family. As a young boy, Malik attended school in Blackburn, but he did not do well in a regular classroom. He often got into fights with other students. The school found his behavior so difficult that they expelled him. His parents did not know what to do, so they decided to send him away. They arranged for him to go to a military school in Pakistan. They hoped that the strict rules and discipline would change his behavior. When Malik returned to England as a young man, he did not settle into a steady job. Instead, he began to get into trouble with the law. In September 2001, a court in Blackburn banned him from the building. The reason was that he had threatened staff members several times. One of those threats happened on September 12, 2001, the day after the attacks in the United States. On that day, Malik told a court usher that he wished the usher had been killed in the attacks. This threat was taken seriously by the court. Over the years, Malik built a criminal record. He was convicted for an assault that was linked to a drug deal. He was also convicted for violent disorder, which meant he had taken part in a fight or disturbance that involved multiple people. He had driving offenses as well. A community organizer in Blackburn later said that Malik had spent time in prison for some of these crimes. People who knew Malik in Blackburn noticed that he sometimes acted in ways that did not seem normal. His own brother said years later that Malik had undiagnosed mental health problems. The brother said these problems were well known in the local community, but no one had given Malik a formal diagnosis or treatment. Malik also faced a loss in the family. About 3 months before the events that would later take place in Texas, a younger sibling of his died. That death affected him deeply. In 2003, according to his brother, something else changed in Malik. The brother said that religious nuts began to influence Malik. Before that time, the brother said Malik did not hate Jewish people. But in the early 2000s, he started to hold extreme religious views. British authorities became aware of these views years later. In 2016, and again in 2019, Malik was referred to a British program called Prevent. This was a voluntary program designed to stop people from becoming radicalized. It was not clear whether Malik took part in the program or not. In 2020, Malik spent about 6 months in Pakistan. When he returned to England, the British Security Service, MI5, looked into him. He was placed on a watch list as a subject of interest. For 4 weeks, MI5 conducted a short investigation. But by 2021, they moved him to a different list called Former Subject of Interest. That meant they no longer considered him an active terrorist threat. He was not charged with any terrorism offense in the United Kingdom. Malik was married and had children. During a later incident, he mentioned that he had 6 children. His family life was not widely reported in public records, but it was known that he remained connected to his relatives in Blackburn. His older brother, in particular, would later become involved in events that Malik set in motion. But at this point in his life, Malik was living in England with a criminal record, a history of mental instability, and a growing set of extreme beliefs. He was known to British authorities, but they had downgraded his status. He was not under active surveillance. Malik Akram left England about 2 weeks before the incident. On December 27, 2021, he flew into John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City. On his customs form, he listed a hotel in Queens as his local address. When he went through airport security, American authorities checked his name against their databases. He did not raise any red flags at that time. he was allowed to enter the United States. From New York, he traveled to Dallas, Texas. He arrived there on December 31st. Over the next several days, he stayed in at least 2 homeless shelters in the Dallas area. He arrived at the first shelter on January 2nd. A worker there later described him as quiet. He did not stay long enough to build relationships with other people. Security cameras captured him being dropped off at one shelter by a person who then hugged him and left after about 15 minutes. On January 5th, Akram went to the Islamic Center of Irving, a mosque. He asked if he could sleep inside the building. The mosque officials told him he could not because of city rules and their own policy. Akram became angry and argumentative. He was asked to leave. The next day, he returned to apologize. Officials said his behavior was completely different that day. He was calm and polite. They let him pray inside. They noted that his mood swung between extremes. On January 13th, 2 days before the main event, Akram bought a handgun. The gun was a Taurus G2C. It was not bought from a store. He bought it on the street from a man he had met at one of the homeless shelters. That man later said he believed Akram wanted the gun to scare someone who owed him money. The gun had been legally sold in early 2020, but was reported stolen later that year. On the morning of January 15th, 2022, Akram went to a Starbucks less than a mile from Congregation Beth Israel, a Jewish synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. After that, he traveled to the synagogue by bicycle. It was a Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, when services were held. He arrived around 10 a.m. The synagogue's front door was locked. Akram knocked. Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker came to the door. Akram said he was a homeless man looking for shelter. The rabbi let him in and made him a cup of tea. The rabbi later said he was not suspicious at first, but some parts of Akram's story did not match up, which made him curious. The rabbi introduced Akram to a man named Jeffrey R. Cohen, who was the vice president of the synagogue's board. Cohen later said Akram seemed calm and was on his phone. Soon after, the Sabbath service began. At one point, the rabbi turned his back to the congregation to pray toward Jerusalem. While his back was turned, he heard a click. That click was Akram pulling out his pistol. Akram began yelling. He took 4 people hostage inside the synagogue. The 4 were Rabbi Citron Walker, Jeffrey R. Cohen, and 2 other people who were attending the service. One of the hostages, Jeffrey Cohen, acted quickly. While Akram was moving people around, Cohen secretly dialed 911 on his phone. He placed the phone down with the screen facing the table, so Akram could not see it was on. The call went through. At 10:41 a.m., the Colleyville Police Department received that 911 call. A police officer arrived at the synagogue within minutes. Soon after, police announced on social media that a hostage situation was happening and that a SWAT team was at the scene. More law enforcement came. The FBI arrived, along with the Texas Department of Public Safety. Eventually, more than 200 officers and agents were at the scene, including a team of about 70 FBI hostage negotiators and rescue operatives who flew in from Quantico, Virginia. The synagogue had been streaming its service live on Facebook. That live stream continued even after Akram took control. People watching online could hear what was happening inside. Akram could be heard speaking to police negotiators. At one point, he claimed he had a bomb. That claim was later found to be false. During the live stream, Akram said he had traveled to Texas specifically to take hostages. He said he chose a synagogue because he believed the United States only cared about Jewish lives. He also made statements saying Jews control the world, the media, and the banks. Akram's main demand was the release of a woman named Afia Siddiqui. She was a Pakistani woman serving an 86-year prison sentence in a federal prison in Fort Worth, Texas, which was near the synagogue. Siddiqui had been convicted of trying to kill American officers. Akram called her sister during the hostage crisis. He believed she had been framed and should be freed. The FBI negotiators tried to talk with Akram. They also brought in help. Akram's own brother in England was contacted. British police took the brother to a police station where he could speak to Akram by phone. The brother urged Akram to let the hostages go and to give himself up. Akram told his brother he had come to the synagogue intending to die. He said he wanted to be a martyr and expected to leave in a body bag. Akram was unstable during the talks. He ranted against the United States, Israel, and Jewish people. He used insulting language. He switched between English and other languages. He threatened to kill the hostages. He told the negotiator, "If anyone tries to enter this building, I'm telling you, everyone will die." He also asked each hostage how many children they had, then said to the negotiator, "Do you want to have 7 children lose their parent?" Even so, he let the hostages call their families. Jeffrey Cohen was able to write a post on Facebook while still inside. Around noon, Akram called a large synagogue in New York City called Central Synagogue. He demanded to speak to the senior rabbi there, Angela Bookdahl. When she got on the phone, he told her he had a bomb. He asked her to use her influence to help free Afia Siddiqui. Rabbi Bookdahl hung up and contacted law enforcement. At about 2 p.m., Facebook shut down the live stream. But police still had access to the synagogue's closed-circuit television cameras. They could watch what was happening inside in real time. Around 5 p.m., Akram released one of the 4 hostages. That man walked out of the synagogue. He did not need medical attention. 3 hostages remained inside. As the hours passed, Akram grew more angry and threatening. The standoff reached 10 hours. The 3 remaining hostages, Rabbi Citron Walker, Jeffrey Cohen, and a third person, noticed that Akram was not standing in a good position. They also knew where the nearest exit was. One by one, they moved closer to that exit without Akram noticing. Akram ordered them to get down on their knees. The rabbi offered him a cup of juice. While Akram was drinking the juice, Rabbi Citron Walker shouted at the others to run. He threw a chair at Akram to slow him down. All 3 hostages ran toward the exit and escaped the building. Akram did not fire his gun at them. Outside the synagogue, cameras captured the 3 hostages sprinting out. Akram came out behind them, then went back inside. Once the hostages were safe, the FBI hostage rescue team moved in. At around 9:21 p.m., they used a stun grenade inside the synagogue to try to disorient Akram. They cut the electricity to the building. Then they entered. Within seconds, agents shot Akram multiple times. He died at the scene. No explosives were found inside the synagogue other than the tools police used to enter. The remaining hostages had escaped unharmed. The entire incident had lasted about 11 hours. After the hostages escaped and Akram was shot, the FBI took control of the scene. The synagogue was secured. Bomb technicians swept the building and found no explosives. The FBI's evidence response team entered to collect evidence. The investigation was led by the FBI's North Texas Joint Terrorism Task Force. In the hours after the incident, an FBI official made a public statement. The official said Akram's demands were focused on issues not connected to the Jewish community. This statement drew criticism from Jewish leaders. They pointed out that Akram had targeted a synagogue, used anti-Semitic language, and demanded the release of a woman who had also made anti-Semitic statements. 2 days later, on January 17th, the FBI issued a new statement. It said the incident was a terrorism matter and that the Jewish community was targeted. Over the following days, investigators retrieved electronic data from Akram's devices. They examined his internet search history from the 2 weeks before the hostage crisis. The searches showed he had looked up information about influential rabbis, Afia Siddiqui, gun stores, and pawn shops. This helped investigators understand how he had prepared. The FBI also looked into how Akram obtained the gun. They traced the Taurus G2C handgun back to its last legal sale in early 2020. The gun had been reported stolen later that year. Investigators identified the man who sold the gun to Akram on the street. That man had met Akram at the Union Gospel Mission Dallas, one of the homeless shelters where Akram had stayed. On January 26th, about 11 days after the hostage crisis, a 32-year-old man from Texas was arrested. He was charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm. Federal investigators said he had sold the Taurus G2C to Akram on January 13th, 2 days before the hostage crisis. The man told authorities that he believed Akram wanted the gun to intimidate someone who owed him money. Phone records showed he had exchanged several calls with Akram in the days before the sale. In the United Kingdom, law enforcement also began arrests. The day after the incident, Akram's 2 teenage sons were detained in Manchester, England, by counter-terrorism police. They were questioned and later released without being charged. On January 20th, 2 men were arrested in Manchester and Birmingham as part of the investigation. They were later released with no further action. On January 25th, 2 more men were taken into custody in Manchester. One of them was released without charge on January 27th. British counterterrorism police continued to assist the FBI, sharing information about Akram's background and contacts. On January 21st, the FBI officially announced that the case was being investigated as a federal hate crime and an act of terrorism. The special agent in charge said the investigation would have global reach. Investigators confirmed that Akram had acted alone. There was no evidence of a broader plan or additional conspirators. The FBI Shooting Incident Review Team conducted an investigation into the use of deadly force. Because Akram was killed by FBI agents, the shooting was reviewed to ensure it followed protocol. The review was described as thorough, factual, and objective. For the survivors, life continued after the crisis. Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker, who had already planned to leave the congregation in June 2022, expressed gratitude for the security training he had received. He credited the courses from the FBI and other organizations with helping him and the other hostages know when to flee. The 3 surviving hostages all recovered physically and received support from their community. The synagogue Congregation Beth Israel received an outpouring of support from local faith groups. Muslim leaders in Texas and across the country condemned Akram's actions. The Council on American-Islamic Relations called the hostage-taking an act of pure evil. The Muslim community in Blackburn, Akram's hometown, expressed solidarity with the Jewish community and said their sympathy went out to the hostages. In the months that followed, Jewish organizations and synagogues across the United States increased security measures. Many held vigils and interfaith gatherings to show unity against anti-Semitism. The legal case involving the man who sold the gun moved forward separately. Because Akram died at the scene, no trial was held for him. His body was handled according to procedure, and the case against him was closed with his death. The investigation concluded that Malik Faisal Akram, a 44-year-old British citizen with a criminal record and a history of radicalization, had entered the United States on a tourist visa, acquired a stolen handgun, and carried out a hostage-taking at a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. His actions ended when FBI agents shot and killed him after the hostages escaped. The story of Malik Akram ended in a synagogue in Texas on the night of January 15, 2022, with no remaining hostages harmed and his own life cut short by the force he had chosen to meet. Story 9. Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh was born on December 23, 1973, in London, England. His parents were Pakistani Muslims who had moved to the United Kingdom in 1968. His father, Saeed, and his mother, Kaisra, ran a successful clothing business. Omar was the oldest of 3 children. In his early years, Omar attended Forest School in Walthamstow, a town in northeast London. This was an independent school. When Omar was between the ages of 14 and 16, his family moved temporarily to Pakistan. During that time, he went to Atchison College, which was a very exclusive boys' boarding school. After the family returned to England, he continued his education at Forest School. A childhood friend later recalled that even as a teenager, Omar admired General Zia-ul-Haq, the Islamist military leader of Pakistan. When Omar came back to London after his time in Pakistan, he had become a junior boxing champion. He also told stories about organized crime and gun battles in the streets of Lahore. Omar showed signs of violent behavior from a young age. When he was 8 years old, he punched a teacher and threw him to the floor. As he grew older, people who knew him described him as a bully. He was suspended from school several times because of his behavior. After finishing school, Omar went to the London School of Economics. He studied applied mathematics, statistics, economics, and social psychology. He was known for being academically able, and he became a chess champion while at the university. He also developed a love for martial arts and sports. In 1992, he took part in the World Arm Wrestling Championship in Geneva. Despite his abilities, he dropped out of the university during his first year and did not earn a degree. While at the London School of Economics, Omar came into contact with radical Islamists. A fellow student said that Omar spoke about going to Bosnia to drive aid convoys. After that, he never returned to university. In later years, Omar became a polyglot who could speak 5 languages. In December 2000, he married a woman named Sadia Rauf in Lahore, Pakistan. She held a master's degree in English. In November 2001, they had a child. In late 2000, Omar married Sadia Rauf in Lahore. By that time, he was already connected to militant groups. He had traveled to Bosnia in 1993 during the war there. After Bosnia, he went to an armed training camp in Afghanistan. There, he joined a group called Harkat al-Ansar, which was fighting against Indian rule in Kashmir. In 1994, Omar took part in a kidnapping operation in India. The targets were Western tourists. The group he was with took 3 British citizens and 1 American citizen. The British men were named Miles Croston, Paul Ridout, and Reese Partridge. The American was named Balanus. The kidnappers held these 4 men. The goal was to use them to demand the release of certain prisoners. Indian police and security forces began searching for the victims. During the operation, Omar was caught by the authorities. All 4 hostages were later rescued unharmed. Omar was arrested and put in prison. He was moved between several jails in different cities, including New Delhi and Meerut. While in prison, he was watched closely by jail staff. He asked to read books about Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. People who worked in the jails described him as a tough young man with a sharp mind. He showed violent behavior even inside prison. In one jail, he beat up a deputy jailer. Omar remained in Indian prison for several years. In 1999, a plane called Indian Airlines Flight 814 was traveling from Kathmandu in Nepal to New Delhi in India. 5 armed men, who belonged to the same militant group as Omar, took control of the plane. This group was then called Harkat al-Mujahideen. The hijackers forced the plane to land in Kandahar, Afghanistan. At that time, the Taliban controlled Afghanistan. The Taliban surrounded the plane so that no Indian military team could rescue the passengers. The hijackers made a demand. They wanted 3 men to be released from prison in India. One of those men was Omar. The other 2 were Masood Azza and Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar. All 3 were members of militant groups. The Indian government negotiated with the hijackers for 8 days. During that time, one passenger named Rupin Kityal was stabbed to death by a hijacker. In the end, the Indian government agreed to release the 3 prisoners. In exchange, the hijackers freed the remaining passengers. Omar was released from Tihar jail in Delhi and was given safe passage into Afghanistan. From there, he returned to Pakistan. After his release, Omar became more active. He joined a new group called Jaish-e-Mohammed, which was founded by Masood Azza, one of the other men freed in the hijacking. Omar also developed connections with al-Qaeda leaders. He began to work with a man named Aftab Ansari, who later carried out a kidnapping and an attack on an American cultural center in Kolkata, India. In October 2001, American investigators discovered that Omar had sent about $100,000 from the United Arab Emirates to a man named Mohammed Atta. Atta was one of the hijackers who flew a plane into the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. Investigators believed the money was used to help plan the attacks. This information came out after the attacks. On January 23, 2002, a kidnapping took place in Karachi, Pakistan. The victim was Daniel Pearl, an American journalist who worked for the Wall Street Journal. Pearl had been in Pakistan investigating connections between militant groups and the country's intelligence services. He had arranged to meet a person he believed was a militant leader. Omar had helped set up this meeting. When Pearl arrived at the meeting point, he was taken by a group of men. Omar had planned the kidnapping. The group holding Pearl included members of several militant groups working together. They called themselves the National Movement for the Restoration of Pakistani Sovereignty. This was a fake name. In reality, the group included members of Jaish-e-Mohammed, Harkat-ul-Jihad al-Islami, and other organizations. They took Pearl to a safe house in Karachi that belonged to a Pakistani businessman named Saad Maimun. The safe house was used by al-Qaeda. For several days, Pearl was held captive. On February 1, 2002, he was killed. The killers slit his throat and then beheaded him. A video of the killing was made and later released. The video showed the murder and included statements against the United States. On February 5, 2002, Omar went to a man named Ijaz Shah, who worked for Pakistan's intelligence service. According to later statements by Omar's lawyer, Omar surrendered to Ijaz Shah on that day. However, the police did not announce his arrest at that time. Instead, he was held secretly for a week. On February 12, 2002, Pakistani police in Lahore officially announced that Omar had been arrested in connection with the kidnapping of Daniel Pearl. At the time of the announcement, the police said the arrest had just happened. Omar later told the court that he had actually been in custody since February 5th. When Omar was brought before a judge, he made a statement. He said he did not want to defend himself. He said he had done the kidnapping. He said he had his reasons and that Pakistan should not be serving American interests. He also told officials that as far as he knew, Pearl was dead. After Omar was taken into police custody in Lahore on February 12, 2002, the investigation into Daniel Pearl's kidnapping and murder moved forward. Pakistani police and intelligence officers questioned Omar. They also searched for evidence and other people involved. The video of Pearl's killing had been released, and investigators worked to identify everyone who had taken part. 3 other men were arrested in connection with the case. Their names were Fahad Naseem Ahmed, Syed Salman Saqib, and Sheikh Muhammad Adil. All 3 were accused of helping Omar plan and carry out the kidnapping. The police gathered evidence including phone records, witness statements, and the video recording. Omar was brought before an anti-terrorism court in Pakistan. At his first court appearance, he told the judge that he did not want to defend himself. He admitted to his role in the kidnapping. He said he had done it and that he had his reasons. However, he did not admit to killing Pearl. He said that as far as he knew, Pearl was dead, but he did not say he had committed the murder. The trial took place in 2002. The court considered the evidence against Omar and the 3 other men. On July 15, 2002, the judge announced the verdict. Omar was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The three other men were also convicted. Fahad Nasim Ahmed, Syed Salman Saqib, and Sheikh Muhammad Adil were each sentenced to life in prison. After the sentence, Omar changed his position. He filed an appeal against the murder conviction. He said he had only been involved in the kidnapping, not the killing. He said the confession he made in court had been about the kidnapping, not about the murder. His lawyers began to argue that someone else had killed Daniel Pearl. In 2007, new information came out. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was a high-ranking member of Al-Qaeda, was in American custody. He told interrogators that he was the one who had killed Daniel Pearl. He described the act and said Omar was not the killer. Omar's lawyers used this statement to support his appeal. They said the wrong man had been convicted of murder. For many years, Omar remained in prison while his appeal was considered. He was held at Central Prison in Karachi. In 2011, a report by two investigative journalism organizations looked into the Pearl case. The report concluded that Omar had planned the kidnapping, but that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's confession to the murder was credible. The report also said that FBI experts had compared the hands shown in the killing video to photographs of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and found a match in the vein patterns. In 2014, while still in prison, Omar attempted to harm himself. Prison guards found him in time and stopped him. He was taken to a hospital and survived. The prison filed a case against him for attempted suicide, which was a crime under Pakistani law. In 2020, Omar's appeal reached the Sindh High Court in Pakistan. On April 2, 2020, the court made its decision. The judges overturned Omar's murder conviction. They said there was not enough evidence to prove he had killed Daniel Pearl. They also overturned the life sentences of the three other men who had been convicted with him. However, the court upheld Omar's role in the kidnapping. He had already been in prison for more than 7 years since his arrest, so the court said that time counted as his sentence for kidnapping. He was ordered to be released from death row. The decision caused reactions from the American government and from Daniel Pearl's family. The family said they were disappointed and called for Omar to face justice. The Pakistani government appealed the decision to the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Because of that appeal, Omar was not released. Instead, he was moved to Kot Lakhpat jail in Lahore, still in custody while the higher court reviewed the case. As of March 2021, Omar remained in Kot Lakhpat jail. The Supreme Court of Pakistan had not yet issued its final ruling on the appeal against his acquittal. He was no longer on death row, but he was still imprisoned. Daniel Pearl's family continued to seek closure. The three other men who had been released from prison after the 2020 ruling went free. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who had claimed responsibility for the murder, remained in American custody at Guantanamo Bay, awaiting trial before a military commission. The full resolution of who killed Daniel Pearl remained a matter of legal dispute. The case left a lasting impact. It showed how different militant groups worked together and how the lines between planning and carrying out a crime could be argued in court. For Omar, the legal process stretched over nearly 2 decades, moving from a death sentence to an overturned conviction, with the final chapter still being written by the Pakistani Supreme Court.